Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 26th of June. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open in France with the attack that bears all the hallmarks of Islamist terrorism. A decapitated head, reportedly covered in Arabic writing, was found hanging inside of a U.S.-owned gas company near Lyon, close to a flag bearing Islamist inscriptions. The grisly discovery came after two assailants detonated fuel containers on the premises by deliberately ramming their vehicle into them. One person has been confirmed killed and several others were reportedly injured. According to the French public prosecutor, anti-terrorist forces are investigating what appears to be an organized attack. The site belongs to the Pennsylvania-based industrial gas technology company called Air Products and Chemicals. French Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve announced that several possible accomplices have already been detained, including one suspect believed to be in his 30s who is said to have claimed allegiance to the Islamic State terror group and has been on police radar as a possible radical. France was hard hit earlier this year when an Islamist gunman killed 17 people in the January attack on the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine, followed the next day by a fatal shooting of a policewoman and the deaths of 4 others at a kosher supermarket in Paris 2 days later. And this just in, at least 27 people have been confirmed killed in an attack on a beach hotel in the Tunisian city of Sousse, amid reports that at least one gunman has been killed in clashes after opening fire. The city is one of North Africa's most popular coastal resorts that is frequented by tourists from Europe as well as neighboring countries. Tunisia has been on high alert since 3 Islamist gunmen attacked the Bardo Museum in Tunis in March, killing 22 foreign visitors. And here at home in the Jordan Valley, IDF forces successfully stopped a terror attack in progress this afternoon when a Palestinian gunman opened fire at a group of IDF soldiers at the Beka-Ot checkpoint south of Beit Shean. A reserve unit operating in the area immediately managed to return fire, killing the terrorist. None of the soldiers were injured in the attack, which is the second confirmed terrorist incident this week. An 18-year-old Palestinian stabbed a border police officer at the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City on Sunday. The soldier was severely wounded but managed to shoot and seriously wound his assailant. And even though the investigation of the murder of David Ben Kapara is ongoing, family members told investigators that illegal Arab workers were in the vicinity at the time of his killing. The 70-year-old farmer was laid to rest yesterday before sundown. The Rehovot resident was found severely beaten in an agricultural field between Pedaya and Karmei Yosef in the center of the country on Wednesday and succumbed to his wounds after being evacuated to the Asafa Rofeh Hospital in Srifin. Minister of Agriculture Ori Ariel attended Ben Kapara's funeral and vowed that the perpetrators will be apprehended and brought to justice. In other news, the first of 5 ships set sail from the Greek island of Crete this morning, intent on breaching the naval blockade on Gaza. According to the Palestinian Ma'an news agency, 70 people are aboard the vessel, including Arab-Israeli Knesset member Basel Ghatas of the Joint Arab List, who claims that the flotilla will carry only humanitarian supplies, solar panels, and no weapons. Before embarking on the mission, Ghatas posted a message in Hebrew on his Facebook page reading, "Gaza, here we come." He also wrote that the voyage was finally about to get underway despite many hardships that will be disclosed at a later time. He again declared that the effort is being aimed at raising awareness of what he's calling the siege on Gaza, adding that if the IDF tries to prevent the activists from reaching the shores of the Hamas-run enclave, they will responsibly decide what action to take next. The convoy of ships is expected to reach the waters off of Gaza by the start of next week. In a related development, it has been released for publication that 7 Turkish journalists and activists who said that they came to Israel to cover the Gaza-bound flotilla were deported soon after their arrival at Ben Gurion International Airport yesterday. The 7 were questioned individually to establish if they had ties to the Hamas terror group. Citing security concerns, defense authorities decided to send them back to Turkey 6 hours later and banned any of the group from entering the country again for at least 10 years. With significant gaps still standing in the way of an Iranian nuclear deal, foreign ministers at the 7-nation talks are adding a little diplomatic muscle to the negotiations ahead of the impending June 30th target date to reach a deal. Paris announced that French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius will join the talks in Vienna tomorrow to join U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who is now en route, and his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif, who also arrives in the Austrian capital today. Foreign ministers from the 4 other nations at the negotiating table, Russia, China, Britain, and Germany, are also expected to participate in the last-ditch attempts to bridge the differences between the sides over what limits Tehran must accept on its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions. But with Tehran now apparently backtracking on key points of the emerging deal, the talks may continue on into next month, and officials say that a delay up to July 9th is not a deal breaker. If an agreement is signed by that time, the U.S. Congress will have 30 days to review it before U.S. President Barack Obama will be permitted to suspend American sanctions. A postponement beyond that date, however, would double the congressional review period to 60 days, giving both Iranian and American opponents more time to work on undermining any pact. During a briefing at the State Department, spokesman John Kirby was asked about a letter issued by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, signed by a number of former Obama administration officials, claiming to have a great deal of knowledge about the emerging agreement and saying that they don't believe that it will reach its goals. He also responded to a question over Netanyahu's comment last night that there is still time to secure a good deal.
We recognize that there's going to be all kinds of voices out there. There have been throughout this process, and there will continue to be. If we get a deal and he comes home from Vienna with one, there will continue to be lots of voices, pro and con. He understands that. He's not focused on that.
Even if
he's not focused on, he recognizes and understands and respects the right of many people to have and express an opinion on the negotiations. His focus is on what's going on inside that room, and that's why he's leaving for Vienna tomorrow.
John, the letter also coincides with other efforts, concerted efforts, such as, full-page ads in the Washington Post, other efforts on Capitol Hill, to cast really a shadow on the veracity of how good this deal is. Do you expect that all this effort together can in any way pose a hurdle along the way of signing a deal with Iran?
You mean the efforts
right,
by groups
to say that this deal is not such a good deal, basically.
Welcome to America. I mean, this is democracy, and people have a right to free speech, and they have a right to, to voice concerns about any number of matters, particularly on foreign policy. That's one of the great things about this country, and I think the Secretary respects that. And again, his focus is less on the chatter that's out there, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but less on that and much more on what's going on inside the room. Now, why don't we see if we get a deal? And then if we get a deal, there'll be time and space for a whole other discussion and debate about the merits of it, but we're not there yet.
And in line with the same logic, today, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that there's still time for a good deal, suggesting that this is not a good deal. Do you agree with his assessment?
There's no deal right now, right? So I'm not going to characterize where we are in the negotiation process. I think Secretary Kerry made that very clear yesterday, that while others may, debate and discuss this in real time publicly, he's not going to do that. I'm certainly not going to do that. But to your phrase, good deal, we've always said that no deal's better than a bad deal. We're trying to get the right deal for our national security interests and the interests of security in the region, and that's what the focus is on.
At a separate briefing in Washington before departing for Vienna, U.S. Secretary of State Kerry was asked if he is still optimistic about the nuclear negotiations.
Iran, are you hopeful on Iran, Secretary?
I'm always hopeful, yes. I'm hopeful, but I'm not declaring optimism.
The Palestinian Authority has submitted the first alleged evidence of Israeli war crimes to the International Criminal Court at The Hague in efforts to advance an investigation of last year's conflict with Gaza. The list of claims is based on the findings of a Palestinian Commission of Inquiry and information supplied by non-governmental organizations that was filed just days after the United Nations Human Rights Council issued a report accusing both Israel and Hamas of possible guilt of committing war crimes during the fighting in Gaza. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said that in addition to information about the conflict, he also submitted dossiers on settlements and Israel's treatment of Palestinian security prisoners.
The information provided by the State of Palestine, Commission of Inquiry, and different civil society organizations all make a compelling case for the prompt opening of an investigation. Palestine is a test for the credibility of international mechanisms and instruments, a test the world cannot afford to fail. Palestine has chosen to seek justice, not vengeance. This is why we are here today.
Israeli officials have been swift to criticize the Palestinian move at The Hague.
We view the Palestinian initiative at the ICC as nothing more than a provocation. We believe that it's a manipulation. It's an attempt to politicize the work of the ICC by presenting documents which have absolutely nothing to do with the judicial work of the ICC. And we are certain that the prosecutor will perfectly understand it and will not accept any of this Palestinian manipulation.
The White House and members of Congress are backing Israel's opposition on the Palestinians' ICC submission. National Security Council spokesman Alistair Baskey said that the U.S. has made it clear that it rejects action taken against Israel at the International Court as being counterproductive. A senior member of the subcommittee that oversees foreign aid, U.S. Representative Nita Lowey, went even further, threatening that by formally submitting allegations against Israeli forces to the ICC chief prosecutor, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas triggered a provision in American law that suspends all economic assistance to the PA. Joining me now in the studio is political analyst and Wall Street Journal contributor Amos Asael of the Hartman Institute. Hi, Amos. Thank you for coming in. All right, first let's talk about what's going on in France and the possible repercussions of that attack, as well as, events are still unfolding in Tunisia, so we don't know the details on that, but that appears to even be a bigger attack.
Well, what we know for fact is that the president of France has already made plain that as far as he's concerned, the attack in France has been perpetrated by Islamists. And we can say that gradually time is running out for European escapism. The very attitude that kept thinking that the world, civilization is not under attack and Europe is not the focus of this attack. The fact is that Western civilization is under attack and the attack is focusing on Europe. And the result of all this already is that the parts of European society that want greater action taken in the face of this gathering attack are gathering power. And they will gather more power, and sooner or later we'll see one of the right-wing alternatives to the established post-war order win an election somewhere in Western Europe. I don't know to predict whether it will be in France or in Scandinavia or somewhere else, and whether it will be in 1 year or 5 years or 7 years or 4 years, but I'm afraid it's coming.
I'm afraid it is. All right, now let's talk about the natural gas deal here in Israel. What can you tell us about what comes next following last night's meeting by the Security Cabinet?
Well, what happened is that Bibi Netanyahu's aim of emerging with what will finalize almost 16 years of regulatory angst, in the course of which Israel, after having been faced suddenly with massive gas findings, was compelled to re-examine its pre-existing regulatory attitude towards the finding of natural resources that didn't exist. It all had to be formulated, and it was done in a typically Israeli improvisational way. And we ended up with some very good things, like, for instance, the establishment of a sovereign fund that will see to it that all the massive returns that are coming our way from gas will be trickled over many, many decades into the budget rather than being thrust into it, what would have caused fiscal indigestion. That has been treated thanks to Stanley Fischer. Similarly, there's also been a cap placed on exports. In other words, we now have a 53% cap saying up to 53% can be exported. The rest will go to the benefit of the Israeli consumer. That too has been done and is good. And the royalties formula has also been redone. So all this has been done. What now remains to be done, and what the government grappled with yesterday, is the formulation of the monopoly that currently exists. Netanyahu's aim is to, on the one hand, not fully please the monopoly's opponents who want it completely undone and want the gas fields fully open to competition. At the same time, he's also not fully endorsing the monopoly. He's going in a middle way that was disagreeable to the outgoing antitrust commissioner. He tried yesterday to pass his semi-privatization plan through the security cabinet. That failed because of Aryeh Deri's attitude, so it's going to happen in a different way through the Knesset and through the appointment of a different antitrust commissioner.
All right, let's switch topics and let's talk about the controversy that's been going on with Minister of Culture Miri Regev. What do you make, I mean, is there some legitimacy to her position? It's not popular, I realize, but that artists are allowed to express themselves freely, she says, as long as but there's no reason that the state should fund those who are working to damage it. And of course, we're talking about the people and the groups that she deems are damaging the country.
I don't think that has ever been disputed, this principle. The person with whom to contrast her attitude during a mere 1 month of incumbency is not her predecessors from the left, but her predecessor from the right, Limor Livnat, who fulfilled that position for lengthy years while being at least as right-wing as Miri Regev, and probably even more, and yet having never maneuvered herself into such a clash with the artistic community. In other words, Miri Regev's conduct here, which is very well calculated in my view, although it is being presented in an impulsive way, it's a calculation. She wants to pick this fight in order to ingratiate a particular electorate, and she's doing that very efficiently. But the cause itself, in the name of which she's speaking, is not new, and it's not a cause.
Okay, just really quickly, because we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you about the Iranian nuclear deal. Of course, it's just days away until the possibility of reaching, well, the self-imposed deadline, which now we know may be extended into July. But given the activity of Iran this week, you know, passing legislation barring access to military sites, and the Ayatollah's comment about not agreeing to an extended period of time that they won't engage in sensitive nuclear work, what in your view is going on? Is the West naive? Are we seeing typical naivete like you were talking about in answer to the terrorism? Or is there some legitimacy to the Obama administration's reasoning that this agreement will prevent a nuclear-armed Iran?
The West is not monolithic. It's neither naive nor sober. There are such within it and such within it, and all arguably such. So I wouldn't generalize. I would, however, say that the negotiators on behalf of the West are, in our mainstream Israeli view, naive and therefore eager to generate a deal, unlike the Iranians they face. The Iranians they face are not as empowered politically as the American interlocutors over there. And the Iranians are part of a massive struggle within the Iranian system between the people who actually launched and led the revolution, or what is left of them, led by Khamenei, and others who are more pragmatic.
Yeah.
And the veterans and the conservatives are backed and fueled by the militant National Guard. And I therefore say that they will be the ones who will decide the fate of this negotiation. But if the Iranian decision is indeed to generate a deal, the deal will hatch because the West wants it.
Well, we'll find out in a couple of days. It's always good to have you with us. Thanks for coming in this afternoon. In other news, for the first time since stepping down from office last month, former Likud minister Benny Begin had harsh words for the government's treatment of Arab residents. Speaking at a law conference at the Haifa University, Begin said that it is the state's obligation to treat its Arab population with dignity and respect, and not as second-class citizens. He went on to say that the granting of equal opportunities and basic human rights is not an act of generosity, but a mandatory requirement of the nation's basic constitution. The veteran Likud member's comments come on the heels of a new controversy sparked by Deputy Interior Minister Yaron Mazuz, who told Arab members of Knesset that the government is doing them a favor by allowing them to be citizens and that they should return their Israeli identity cards. Begin branded those remarks as a disgrace and said that he was very embarrassed that they were made by someone from his own party. The police will likely have an interim commissioner as of next week. The head of the Tel Aviv district, Bentzi Sau, is set to be appointed as the inspector general in place of Yochanan Danino, who is retiring from the post on the 30th of June. The cabinet is slated to vote on the assignment Sunday, and if approved, Sau will either serve for 2 months or until the selection of a permanent commissioner. An unmanned aerial vehicle from Gaza is being examined by IDF Engineering Corps forces after it crashed in Israeli territory yesterday afternoon. The drone was detected by the Army before it even took off from the Hamas-controlled strip and had been under surveillance during its entire flight. At one point, Air Force jets were dispatched to intercept the UAV, but it fell to earth on its own and no intervention was required. In criminal news, the victim who was murdered outside of a Hadera kiosk late last night has been identified as 33-year-old Iqsin Absaheb, who is an ex-convict who spent several years in prison. He was shot at point-blank range on the city's Hillel Yaffe Street by a masked assailant riding a motorcycle. Another man, Oleg Mikhailov, also known to authorities, was seriously injured in the assault and taken for medical treatment at a nearby hospital. Police said it's likely that the incident is a dispute between crime gangs and that investigators are looking into the possibility that both Absaheb and Mikhailov were involved in a violent crime just hours before being shot. After weeks of setbacks, the Islamic State has launched swift counteroffensives in predominantly Kurdish areas of northern Syria, killing in car bombings and wounding dozens of people. In the two-pronged attack on the northeastern city of Hasakeh and the border town of Kobani come 2 days after an ISIS spokesman acknowledged that the group might lose some battles but vowed that they would not be defeated. Officials say that the assault by Islamic State captured part of Hasakeh, which has long been divided between Syrian Kurds and the military forces of President Bashar al-Assad. The radical jihadists also hit Kobani, which has become a symbol of Kurdish resistance. Backed by a campaign of U.S.-led airstrikes, the Kurds have succeeded in driving ISIS out of the Syrian-Turkish border town and surrounding villages in January. In financial news, the shekel today ended the trading week by losing strength against all major foreign currencies and due to the closure of the stock market on Fridays. Here's a look at the closing numbers for the week. The IBA weather team tells us we can expect fair conditions tomorrow, along with a slight rise in temperatures and a drop in humidity. You're looking at the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow when I'll be back at this desk, same time, same channel, to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.